I will never forget my first close encounter with an elephant in the wild. It was Easter of 2022 and the country road we were on was completely empty. My husband was driving a safari Land Cruiser and I was sitting next to him. With my big camera with a zoom lens around my neck, I was on photo duty as my husband navigated this truck-like big vehicle through African plains. Perfect gender roles, right? We were just out of the city where we rented our car from and didn't expect to see any wild animals yet. But then suddenly we spotted a herd of elephants in the horizon, I would say probably around 30 or 35 of them, so a group on the larger side. They were crossing the road actually from our right side to the left side, gingerly, unhurriedly, the young ones, baby and toddler elephants, following their mothers in a line. Then, a large adult elephant, probably one of the matriarchs of her herd, saw us and started to walk towards us instead of crossing the road. And as she approached us, I could feel from her body language that she was relaxed. Living relatively close to a city, these animals are accustomed to some traffic and cars. As long as we minded our own business and kept a safe distance from these wild animals, we were told there was no reason for us to be scared of the animals. The elephant's trunk and tail were lowered and her movements were gentle. And then the matriarch made eye contact with me in the car and came a few steps closer. Maybe she was as inquisitive about me as I was about her, but at this point, I was tensing up because despite the safety of our van, I was merely 2 meters away from a beast who had young ones. She had this playful expression on her face though and had a large wrinkled forehead and a pair of long white tusks extended from the upper jaw. There is no way I can prove this, but I know deep inside my heart that as soon as I was a bit scared, she noticed this and I swear she nodded and smiled at me and took a few steps back. She didn't want to scare me, she just wanted to welcome me to a land where she reigned happily and where I was a visitor. This story took place in Botswana, home to over 130,000 elephants, just like this matriarch I befriended, roaming the southern African nation's lush landscapes. Botswana is home to the largest elephant population in the world, but it's not just a show for the safari tourists. As African elephants face decimation from poaching, Botswana stands as one of the last strongholds for these gentle giants. So how are they doing this? Stay seated in your safari van because we are about to explore some of the most inspiring animal conservation stories of our times. Throughout the last century, poaching, habitat loss and human-animal conflict have pushed African elephants to the brink of extinction. According to the World Wildlife Fund, we've lost over 80% of these gentle giants in just the past century. Every single day, around 40 recorded elephants fall, which equates to about 15,000 losses a year. The longer historical picture is even more stark. African elephant populations have shrunk by 98% since 1500 in just 5 centuries. There were 25 million elephants in 1500, 10 million in 1900, and the numbers plummeted to a mere 300,000 by the mid-90s. Even though the ivory trade was outlawed internationally in 1989, poaching skyrocketed in the 2010s. This was due to the rise of demand, particularly in some East Asian countries where tusks become ornaments and status symbols. Throughout history, economic hardship, political instability and any sort of flourishing illegal trade activities typically go hand in hand. Across the 20th century, Botswana's neighbors, particularly South Africa and Zimbabwe, also countries which are natural habitats for elephants, often danced with hardship. Colonial legacies, alongside resource conflicts and political turmoil, painted a map of fragility. Apartheid, civil wars and poverty cast long shadows and devastated millions of lives. On the other hand, Botswana was often considered the poster child of relative stability, peace and economic progress in a region prone to turbulence. In the 20th century, Botswana was a refuge for elephants compared to other African nations, but its ivory tusks weren't entirely immune to the global poaching crisis. The early 21st century saw a chilling wave roll over Botswana's elephant haven. International ivory cravings, particularly from Asia, fueled a surge in poaching. Criminal networks like opportunistic predators saw the country's relative stability as a gateway for their illicit trade. Elephant carcasses, once a rare sight, became grim reminders of a battle brewing in the shadows. Botswana now faced a formidable test of its conservation resolve, and the crisis demanded immediate attention. But Botswana, the sanctuary-turned battleground, stood poised to fight for its gentle giants in a fight that would define its future and the fate of its magnificent elephants. Botswana has a long history and culture of respecting and protecting its wildlife. The protection formally began in 1966 when, instead of joining the hunting party, Botswana's first president, Sir Seretse Khama, banned elephant hunting altogether. It's important to note that Seretse Khama started his tenure as a president also in 1966, so elephant conservation was clearly a priority in a young nation that just broke the shackles of colonialism. In the following year, 1967, the country's fate changed irreversibly. Diamonds were discovered in Botswana. Such a precious and expensive resource could have been a curse in what used to be one of the poorest countries in the world, breeding conflict, inequality and corruption. But Botswana managed the diamond boom effectively, investing in infrastructure and people, and established strong financial principles to navigate the boom. Hence, the relative availability and abundance of financial resources was another big contributor to Botswana's elephant conservation success story. Diamond wealth wasn't just stashed away, it became the fuel for conservation. Infrastructure for protecting elephants rose from the ground, powered by this precious resource. And unlike a shaky throne, Botswana's political stability provided a sturdy platform for conservation to flourish. Decades of steady progress, far from the chaos of coups and wars, allowed the elephant kingdom to grow strong. This early sanctuary gave these gentle giants a vital head start, but a wise king needs loyal subjects, and Botswana found them in its communities. Through reformed land and resource rights, communities were given a stake in the game. The voices of those closest to elephants, traditional authorities, leaders, were particularly important. Granting local communities control over land and wildlife resources fostered a sense of ownership and responsibility for elephant protection. Revenue from tourism and hunting quotas was shared with communities, directly linking conservation success to their livelihoods. In addition, there were training and employment opportunities in wildlife monitoring, and programs in schools and communities raised awareness about the importance of elephants and the threats they face. All of these resulted in communities' active participation in patrols, monitoring, and even running ecotourism ventures. Speaking of ecotourism, responsible tourism in Botswana isn't just a safari adventure, it's a lifeline for elephants. It pumps financial fuel for protection, educates visitors, and empowers communities, safeguards habitats, and builds global partnerships, all while fostering respect between humans and these gentle giants. It's a win-win, weaving a brighter future for Botswana's elephants and enriching the land they call home. This success story was also etched in data. Research and monitoring became the compass, guiding policy adjustments and keeping Botswana ahead of the game. Even the battles with human neighbors weren't fought with swords, but with chili fences and electric barriers, clever peace offerings reducing the friction of living side by side. And no king rules alone. Botswana knew this well. They joined forces with NGOs, local communities, and other African nations, building a continent shield for their elephants. Even though we are focused on elephants, I wanted to quickly emphasize that Botswana's wildlife and animal conservation efforts are very holistic and don't just pertain to elephants. More importantly, it's not just to protect the animals, but the communities as well. I will give you an example. Cattle farming is a very important activity in Botswana, not just economically, but also culturally. Owning cattle grants not just financial security, but also social standing and cultural capital. So, in Botswana, many people who have regular jobs in cities will also keep cattle somewhere in the countryside. This is also considered a way to support some lower-income people in the villages by hiring them to basically take care of your animals back home. Such was the case for the manager of a safari lodge I've befriended during my visit to Botswana, Mary, and as we sat around the fire and chatted one evening. Despite having a very good job in her country's booming hospitality sector, Mary kept a cattle post in her ancestral village close to Francistown in eastern Botswana. When I met Mary, she had just received compensation from the government for a cow of hers that was, well, attacked and eaten by a lion. One day, a lion broke the fence of Mary's cattle post, which is managed by her relatives in the village, and ate a cow. When Mary reported this to the Department of Wildlife and National Parks, they sent an executive to confirm this report. And indeed, the executive found samples of a lion's fur on the broken fence, and they compensated Mary for the cow. But this is so much more than the government practically buying a tasty dinner for that wild lion from Mary's farm. When people like Mary are empowered like this, everyone wins, except maybe for that poor cow. There is a beautiful African proverb that goes, "An elephant does not get tired of carrying his trunk." With the right legal framework, support and initiatives, wildlife conservation does not have to be a burden on the communities. Right now, there are about 415,000 elephants left in Africa, an impressive recovery from 300,000 in the mid-90s, a success Botswana's elephant conservation efforts have surely contributed to. 130,000 of all African elephants live in Botswana, which makes it about a total third of these gentle giants in the continent. Botswana's elephants are among the healthiest and most genetically diverse in the continent. On the other hand, Botswana's human population is only 2.5 billion, while the entire African continent is 1.2 billion strong. In Africa, on average, nearly 3,000 people share a land with one elephant, while in Botswana, that number drops to under 20. In other words, you're 18 times more likely to see an elephant in Botswana than in any African nation, and if you're lucky like me, they might even smile at you, but hopefully from a safe distance. While Botswana has a truly remarkable concentration of these endangered creatures, this success hasn't been without its challenges, limitations, and even controversies. The poaching problem in Botswana still experiences surges. For example, during 2017 and 2018, a group of scientists estimated that there were 385 cases of poaching. Balancing the needs of these gentle giants with the realities of human-elephant conflict and a constant tug-of-war over land demands creative solutions. Internal resource constraints, climate change and erratic rains, and an ever-shifting global ivory market add further complexity. International forces haven't made the fight easier. Transnational crime networks, which are becoming increasingly sophisticated in their operations, see Botswana's stability as a vulnerability. And the endless demand for ivory in distant lands casts a long, chilling shadow that no single nation can completely outrun. In addition, since the poachers are often heavily armed and pose a dangerous threat to rangers and local communities, Botswana's Department of Wildlife and National Parks operates under a use of force guideline that prioritizes ranger safety and de-escalation. This is colloquially known as a shoot-to-kill approach, although it's not an official policy. This approach has attracted both support and criticism. Supporters argue it provides rangers with necessary tools to deter and apprehend well-armed poachers, protecting both themselves, elephants, and communities. Critics raise concerns about potential human rights violations and lack of transparency in operational details. All in all, although not entirely untouched by the global poaching crisis, Botswana's elephants were protected by a proactive shield, a powerful combination of strong government protections and a deep community involvement in conservation. This helped weather the storm of increased poaching in the early 21st century compared to other African nations. While vigilance remains ever present, Botswana's success offers priceless lessons for effective elephant protection. Its story whispers the secrets of impact: strong government policies providing the network, communities acting as guardians with deep-rooted knowledge, and dedicated anti-poaching measures forming a firm line of defense. But the key ingredient, the catalyst for lasting success, lies in collaboration. When governments, communities, and international bodies join hands, the future of these gentle giants shines brighter. Things might not be perfect, but if I was an elephant, I'd prefer to be born in Botswana rather than anywhere else in our world. I hope you enjoyed my presentation about some of the most majestic creatures of our nature and how thousands of them are thriving in Botswana. Here at Sanity Feed, we are all about the "oh wow, that actually works" moments in this messy, beautiful world. I've seen my fair share of storm clouds as a globe-trotting journalist, but here at Sanity Feed, I hope to flip the script. If my stories resonate with you, please hit the like and subscribe buttons and join me on an optimistic adventure where we hunt for solutions, pun intended, not just headlines. From the plains of Botswana to mountains of Nepal, we will continue exploring solutions to some of humanity's biggest challenges, proving that progress, even the quiet kind, or sometimes very loud, is out there, waiting to be found.